Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Fritz, and I'm in the Office of Christian Formation. I'm joined today with my two colleagues, Miata Wilson and Janet Hayes. And we are your dynamic trio in the Office of Christian Formation in the Presbyterian Mission Agency. So welcome. Thank you for being here. We see some familiar faces. We see some new friends. And we're excited to talk with you today about what the Lilly Endowment has selected us for through their Christian Parenting Initiative. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to have an overview of the grant and let you know, what it is, what we've committed to doing, what we were selected to do. And then there'll be some opportunity for you to ask questions and also some action things, some things that you can participate in. And we'll have some links and things like that to share with you. So thank you for being here. And we'll go ahead and get started. So before I share my screen, I'll just kind of give you the general idea is that the Lilly Endowment is something that maybe many of us have heard of. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Lilly Endowment before this. Yeah. So they're located in Indiana. It's a family endowment. And some might suggest that the mainline denominations have really benefited from these grants and these ministry grants that they do. And so there's been various grants over the years around preaching, around faith formation in children, thriving congregations. There's a number of different initiatives they do. They are committed to a certain figure of money that they commit to the state of Indiana. And then they have a bunch of other initiatives. So I encourage you, if you don't know about the Lilly Endowment, to go ahead and search that in your Google and find out all about them. So last fall, the Lilly Endowment contacted our stated clerk at the time, J. Herbert Nelson, asked the Presbyterian Church USA to consider looking at this grant, which is the Christian Parenting Initiative is what they named it. At the time, they indicated that they would be doing $60 million in grants. They've since added quite a few more, so that's exciting too. There are differences in their grant processes, so you might have heard some of this stuff from perhaps our friends over at Gen On, perhaps even Louisville Seminary, and also Passport, which produces our D365, which may be more familiar to some of you. So oftentimes when Lilly does one of these large initiatives, they do an invitation-based process where folks get the grant first and start their work. I think that helps inform them on how they'll put it out as a competitive process. So while we got a letter asking us to apply, it was most certainly to the competitive process. And in the end, they awarded, I believe, 77 different grants for over $90 million. So we were excited to be part of that. We worked on it through the end of last year and into the first part of this year. And gigantic thank yous to my colleague Janet Hayes, who had been hired for approximately 1 week before I was like, you said something about grants? Guess what? We're going to write for a $1.25 million grant. And I've never done it before. And here we go. So we did have some support in the Presbyterian Mission Agency, but interestingly, the PMA, the PCUSA have not done many of these Lilly grants. So the one in most recent history was the Company of New Pastors. Perhaps some of you may have heard about that. Beyond that, I'm really not sure what other grant processes we've participated in. So flying blind. So we trusted the Holy Spirit, thought about what we're passionate about with faith formation at home. It's something that our office has been working on really for since our existence, since 2019, and felt that we had something to offer. So here we are. So Janet shared with you just our press release to give you some general ideas. There's some links in that press release where you can see whom the other recipients are and that sort of thing. So, all right, I am going to share my screen. What I'm going to do is walk you through what we're going to do. I think that's what most of you want to know, right? How are we going to use this money? What are we going to do? And how might you be involved? So I have a few slides about that. All right. Okay. I trust Janet, you'll tell me if that did not work, right?
You are good to go.
Okay. All right, let me move there. Right, so much of what I'm going to share with you comes directly from our proposal, and I'll kind of flesh that out as we go along. Like I said, we will answer questions at the end, and if it is helpful for you and you want to type those questions into chat as you think about it, that's great. I just won't see it till we're done. So the Presbyterian Mission Agency is excited to engage in an initiative with the leaders, parents, and caregivers of our faith communities to imagine and strengthen the role of the household in Christian formation. So essentially, we're going to do this in two ways. We're going to equip and support our households and holistically support parents and caregivers who will be passing on faith. And we're going to encourage and celebrate thriving intergenerational faith communities who support these households. So what you'll see throughout our plan is that there are multiple entry points, ways that we will directly try to reach our parents and caregivers, and ways that we're going to work with church leaders to do that. So let's start out with parents and caregivers. One thing to note here is caregiver is a word that Lilly uses, and so it is a word that we used through our grant process. I'm not sure that we're going to use it into the grant cycle, simply because caregivers often mean something different to everybody. But as part of our proposal, we used that word. We'll talk about all the different kinds of families, households, and significant adults that we'll be trying to support and reach in this Lilly grant. So we're going to do this in a number of ways. Parenting groups. One of the first things in our survey that we did directly to parents and caregivers was, what do they feel like they need? One of their requests was, we need other ways to connect with other parents. So we have a plan for supplying some parent group manuals, some templates, some studies. We're going to hold some online skill building sessions. And I say that loosely because we're still thinking about the platform and the way those sessions will look. But what we have learned is that our parents and families are not asking for more things to do, but they're asking for ways in which they can build their confidence and have the skills that they need to pass on their faith to their children and youth. So there'll be synchronous and asynchronous training opportunities in these sessions. So we will have some live pieces that we'll do at a national level, but then there will be some evergreen materials as well. There's going to be free downloadable resources as well as published books. We'll talk about what that looks like from our partners at Presbyterian Publishing. And finally, retreats for practicing these skills and connecting with intergenerational community. So at a national level, we can't hold all of the retreats, of course, but we can provide the materials needed for churches, worshiping communities to do this. And so we'll be doing that throughout our process. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the resource development. So another note about what it means when we say parents and caregivers. Directly from our grant, it says that we'll be providing support and resources to families that include two-parent households, single parents, LGBTQIA+ families, foster families, and grandparents. So this is not a exclusive statement. It is to say that we support all sorts of families and those that consider themselves to be significant adults in the life of a child or a youth. I think that in the PCUSA, in particular, since our congregations skew to an older member, we've got many grandparents that are looking for ways to equip their grandchildren. And so that is part of our plan and something that we hope to hear a little bit from you all as well. So how are we going to support churches and worshiping communities and leaders? So we are going to use the language of churches and worshiping communities. That comes directly from the PCUSA having traditional churches that have a session and, a called and installed pastor, as well as we have over 700 new worshiping communities that that may spin out of presbyteries or congregations. So we are going to use that language, churches and worshiping communities. So a number of ways here. First and foremost, cohorts are going to be one of our huge programmatic goals. There'll be 50 total cohorts is the goal, two waves of 25 each. And these cohorts will be led by trained coaches. We've already been meeting with our coaches to talk about what that looks like. And they're going to preferably be cohorts will preferably be a couple of churches in the same geographical area or worshiping communities working together. There's going to be some leniency there, especially with our new worshiping communities and our new immigrant communities. They may need to work together across geographical lines, but we're going to look to place these all around the country. Throughout the cohort process, we mentioned the teaching sessions, the skill building sessions. So those will be intermingled with the cohort and the cohort sessions for the leaders. And then at some point during their cohort, they will be given a retreat funding and a template to use. So we'll develop a intergenerational retreat. We'll have a template for that with one of our partners, and there'll be a grant that the cohorts can use to hold a retreat. We hope to work closely with our partners in the Presbyterian Church Camp and Conference Association. And while it may not be possible in every location, we're really going to work to find some Presbyterian camps that these retreats can be held at. So I talked a little bit about the parent groups. So there will be the manual and the templates and the studies for the parent caregiver cohorts and groups. Resources to equip families to talk about their faith. And all of this, we're talking about how are we going to put this, where are we going to put this? Because the current Presbyterian Mission Agency website is not going to be it. We're in the middle of a new website build, so that's great. And we need to talk about what the best digital platform is, the most accessible. This will be a great place to get feedback from all of you. All right, a little bit more about partnerships. One of the strengths I believe that our proposal had is that we're reaching far out wide from just who we know in the mission agency. So we plan to partner with, and we had letters of support from many of these folks and sort of verbal, commitment to this from others. So many of you may know what we call the Christian Formation Collective. These are the 5 organizations that support faith formation across the lifetime. So I've put the little alphabet soup here, but I'll say who they are. So we have the Association of Presbyterian Church Educators. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, Ann Wilson's going to kill me. The Association of Partners in Christian Education. PYWA, our Presbyterian Youth Workers Association. UKirk Collegiate Ministries, these are our campus ministries. Presbyterian Older Adult Ministries Network, and our Presbyterian Church Camp and Conference Association. So those are our 5 organizations that we're excited to work with. Presbyterian Publishing is our denominational publisher, and we're going to talk a little bit about what they are working on and committing to. Recreate, we've talked a lot to Recreate in Big Ideas and Youth Ministry about podcasting, about what does play look like in our retreat templates, and so we're excited to work with them. You might know Recreate a little bit better as ARW. And then, of course, internally, we have a lot of partnerships between our agency, between the Office of General Assembly, our 1001 New Worshiping Communities, the area in our agency that holds our racial ethnic associates so that we can work closely with our new immigrant communities and our communities of color. Really, we're going to partner with all of our PMA areas, and we're going to do that through the Office of Innovation. That's a new thing in the Presbyterian Mission Agency, and it's just a way to elevate this as a new way of doing things. So we're excited to explore that more. Part of this grant proposal, which I won't talk a lot about today, internally, the PMA supports programs. That's just what we do. And frankly, we support a lot of adult programs. So part of the grant proposal and the sustainability piece is that we internally need to think differently about how we support leaders and churches. So that is the purpose of the Office of Innovation. Okay, so when I talk about our internal online resources, what you're seeing in front of you now were our sort of brainstorming and things that we used as examples to Lilly that we are looking at creating. So I thought you might be interested to see sort of the wide variety of things that we're looking at. From milestones, that was another really important thing in our parent survey is our parents and caregivers asked, how do we celebrate milestones at home? What's a simple way to do that? Our faith practices at home, how do we engage in service from our household, peacemaking, and really connecting with our immigrant families and what it looks like to engage and connect with other communities. So excited about some of these, and there will be many others, and these may change a bit, but I think that this might give you an idea of what we're looking at producing. Okay, Presbyterian Publishing. So we have some fleshed out descriptions of these pieces, but we're giving PPC a chance to sort of flesh that out and put together a timeline for us. But I think I can safely share the general resources that we're looking at. So if you're familiar with the Flyaway Books imprint, those are our children's books. And we will be working with PPC to produce a parent guide for each of those books. So as they are introduced new, and then work backward to get through all of the ones that have already been developed. So this fall will be kind of a trial of that. I'll tell you about that at the end of this. So we're excited about those. Those will be free and downloadable and also in Spanish with all of the books. So Bible Moments for Families is a resource, a book really from from Westminster John Knox that will be a devotional book of sorts, a way for families to enter into family devotions. We're going to have a publication around becoming a Matthew 25 household. What does it mean? And so that's PCUSA speak for those of you that might not be in the PCUSA on this call. Our Matthew 25 initiative is, we have many resources around that really tend to focus on, of course, the church and focus on leaders. So this will be a resource, a book that focuses on how do we live this out in our households. They're proposing a book for multiracial families and all of the complexities and things that our multiracial families deal with. And they're proposing a resource/book for young children, for parents to help their really small children learn different stories, songs, prayers, etc. So those are those publications that PPC will be working on, and we'll talk about if there'll be others, but that is what we introduced to Lilly. Okay, so that's a really general idea of how we're going to utilize the next 5 years in supporting families, supporting parents, and also really working with church leaders. I mentioned very briefly that we'll be doing cohorts, but I will say that this is where so much of the work will be done. And we understand that ministry is extremely contextual, and every community, neighborhood has its own way of doing ministry with the people that they serve. So the coaches and the cohorts will be super important, not only in developing what it means to holistically support families and parents, but also how they might do church differently in their context. So we're going to be telling those stories over the period of 5 years so that everyone can learn from those. So whether you're involved in a cohort or not, we hope that you'll start to hear the story of impact through especially these cohorts, these leader cohorts that happen over 5 years. Really important part of a Lilly grant is to talk about what your impact is going to be. What are your goals? So thought I'd share with you what ours are. So our impact with parents and caregivers. We essentially want households to feel better equipped, skill building. And we also want parents and caregivers to feel a more holistic connection with their faith community. So it's not just the place that they might take their child or youth for the professionals to sort of teach them, but it is the place, their center, their touch point, where they go when things are really hard, not just where they go to celebrate, but where they can be safe and authentic. So I think that is really the core of how we have some programmatic models that support holistic connections and relationships. So we hope to see more of that. And then parent and caregiver groups and intergenerational retreats will become part of the regular rhythm of our faith communities. And we hope to see that continue beyond the 5-year grant process. So those are some of our goals with parents and caregivers. Specifically with our churches and new worshiping communities. We hope that leaders will have a better understanding of how to include faith formation at home resources, better equipped to support families in a more holistic way. This has to do with mental health issues. This has to do with trauma-informed ministries, has to do with the milestones that families are celebrating as well. More churches and worshiping communities will have a focus on faith formation in the home. So we've been saying it and saying it and saying it. We know that faith begins in households, and we're asking for our churches and worshiping communities to think really critically and have some adaptive leadership skills on what that actually looks like and how that can be sustainable. And finally, we'll have created more connections between our new worshiping communities, our new immigrant communities, and our traditional churches. We are a connectional church, and I think that we have a lot to learn from one another. So how can we better connect with each other? So here's the general timeline that we're working from. Officially, the grant begins in 2024, though our budget has a 23-24 combination, so we are able to do some work this year, but it largely is prep work. I shouldn't say most, about half of our grant funding will go to the hiring of a position, somebody that will be key to working with our team in Christian formation and implementing all of this. I should say it's a combination of a staff position and then our contracted positions with coaching and presenters and experts that we'll be bringing in. But the one position that will be hired into the PMA will be posting this September, and that person will begin their position hopefully in January. So they'll start working on developing the cohort program and really fleshing out in great detail what the curriculum will be, the coaches' manuals, the cohort manuals. We'll do that through the winter and spring, and our first round of cohorts will begin in fall of 2024. So this is where we're really going to push in the spring and in the summer to find those first 25 cohorts. Resource development takes a while. We're starting right now, and we hope to start to see the fruits of those labors late in 2024 and into 2025, but some resources will take throughout the 5 years. But we really want to push on our resources to come in the beginning of this grant process rather than towards the end. Once we've completed the first round of cohorts, and we will learn from how those went, and then we'll do a second round of 25 cohorts, January 2026. So you can see that generally we're going to be heavy on the first few years of this grant timeline, which allows us the space through the last 2 years to really tell the story, finish developing resources, and honestly make any adjustments that we need to make. So Lilly allows for you to learn that something may or may not work, and how do you change it up. So we're open to that process because I think that we're all going to be learning about this together. I am going to stop share there. Okay, so those were a lot of words. That's the general idea, and I'm going to pause here and see if you have any questions. You're free to use the raise hand feature or raise your hand physically, and I will look for you. Jenna.
I know Gen On Ministries is doing like 0 to 12-year-olds, like families with 0 to 12-year-olds. Do we have a specific age that we're looking at, or are we doing kind of children and youth households?
Thank you, Jenna. That's important. Yeah, we're going to do children and youth, so through high school. It's true that Lilly really is in the process. They talked a lot about early childhood education, and that's important. But we think we have the capacity to think about children and youth up to through high school. Thanks. Okay, so Erica has a question in the chat. I'm curious to hear how the program curriculum may help connect faith communities, immigrant communities, and how would that look? Yeah, thanks, Erica. So this is a learning for all of us, I think. We do know from, especially from our book grant programs that we've done, that lots of our traditional churches have housed within them new immigrant communities often. So that's one connection, but there's a little bit of a gap of how do we engage with one another? What are the tools we need? So that's one way that we'll do that connection. Another way is that we'll work closely with our racial ethnic associates in the PMA, as well as our new worshiping community staff, who really have a lot of interactions and understand how these communities, what their rhythms are. And, we need to go to where they're at. If you're a, sort of a traditional church, how do we meet these new immigrant communities where they're at, and how do we learn from them? So that is something that we'll be practicing through our cohorts. There are going to be some downloadable resources that we can use, but we hope to be, engaging in that through our cohorts. Does that help? Thank you. See, Erin, yes.
As I was sitting here thinking about partnering with new worshiping communities and immigrant communities, I'm wondering if there is a way, like, let's say my church was interested in participating, but we are not maybe aware of a community that we could reach out to. Is there a way, a locationally based list, since you also mentioned kind of the desire for places to be somewhat locationally close to each other?
Yeah.
Is there a list somewhere that we could look at?
There is a map. And in a moment, I'll see if I can find that. I don't know if Miata, if you've seen that before, but there is a map. So the quick answer is yes. Now, the secondary answer would be, I need to check with my colleagues in 1001 to see how up to date that map is. But I think that's a great idea, right? You're not necessarily going to know who those communities are. And so there has to be a way to sort of start the conversation with one another. And I think that's where some of our connections with mid-council leaders comes into, and really trying to, this will not be a program that has mid-councils as sort of the starting place, but we will be communicating and working in partnership with mid-councils to identify these cohorts. But sometimes our initiatives have the mid-councils as a more of a gatekeeper. In other words, the whole presbytery is involved, right? Or the mid-council leader might decide which churches. So we're going to try to do it in such a way that we do both. We don't want to miss out on congregations that, you know, maybe have fallen under the radar, and all presbyteries are so different. And I also know that faith formation leaders and educators don't often have access in presbyteries. So we are thinking about all of those things. And thank you for that suggestion to make sure that you know where these worshiping communities and new immigrant communities are. Okay. Any other questions? I think Julie was, Julie, were you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi.
I popped one in the chat. Just
Oh,
wondering,
you did.
is
Yeah.
there any opportunity for overlap or communication with other grant recipients that are, you know, working on something related?
Yeah. Yes, I hope so. And have started reaching out to those folks just really preliminarily. So, you know, of course, APSI is 5 denominations, and 2 of the denominations received this grant. A couple of the other denominations did put in a proposal, but did not receive it. But I'm also going to be in conversation with them about what they wanted to do, right? Because I think there's still ways we could work together. Interested in, I don't know how many of you saw that Pittsburgh Seminary was a recipient and is going to do a project around Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood. So I think as a denomination, we should feel obligated to work with as many other grant recipients as we can, because we're not in competition. Like, we're not selling a product, really. I mean, there are going to be some things that you need to purchase, but we're interested in leaders connecting in any way they can. And so to me, the fact that there are, you know, over $90 million in grants out there, in the Presbyterian Church USA, we don't connect to all of those, but there's probably more than we realize that we may connect to. So working on that as well. Thanks, Janet, for finding that map. Let's see. I see that my colleague Carl Horton is on this call. Carl, are you in a place where you can share your face or your voice? He might not be. He is.
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody.
So I just wanted to say that one of, Carl's one of the key partners in developing this, and will certainly, not only, of course, with peacemaking and our compassion, peace, and justice. Carl's the coordinator in the peacemaking program. We'll be working with them, but also just overall the grant. So do you want to say anything fun, Carl?
You know what? I'm really excited about this grant, and I do love, I also do cohorts, as people know, so I love the cohort component. I love the retreat component. I'm thrilled that this is happening. And just from a peacemaking perspective, for too long, we just haven't had the capacity to create resources for parents, households, children, and to think of new ways of for households to do faith formation is really exciting. And of course, a part of that faith formation is peace and justice work, and exposing children to those topics as well as a part of their formation. So no, it's really exciting to me, and I'm thrilled to be a partner, one of the PMA partners in this. And it was really, it was an experience to work with Stephanie on, and so many others, on getting this grant application put together. So anyway, good to see you all.
Thanks, Carl. Yeah, 75
Mhm.
pages if you're interested in knowing how big it is. So, yeah. Hi, Linda.
Hi. It sounds to me like the real core of this is in the creation of these cohorts. Could you speak a little more about how you intend to put them together? Is it a cohort of congregations, a cohort of educators? What will it look like? Will
Thank
they
you.
apply to be a cohort, or are you going out and creating them?
Right. I think that some of the really strong logistics I'm waiting for as we hire somebody, and we're going to work on creating that in the spring. But what I can tell you for sure is that these are cohorts of congregations and new worshiping communities and new immigrant communities. So for example, if your church and the church that's, I don't know, downtown, right? Like maybe you're a suburban church, maybe you have a relationship with the church in the city, and you decide together that you really want to work on this initiative. You really want to be a part of it. You're really interested in new ways of connecting with children and families and youth. So you would come together to do that. We would create a cohort out of those two churches of 8 to 10 leaders. So you'd have some representatives that were on the cohort, right? And then we would pair you with a trained coach, and we train our coaches through the International Coaching Federation, ICF. And we've been doing these cohorts with these trained coaches, different cohorts, over the last 3 years. So we are developing quite a coaching network. And then that cohort will have a manual per se to start working through, and a time frame and a curriculum. So it would be probably 2 to 3 leaders from each of the congregations. Even better, you have a congregation and you decide to, pair with a new worshiping community. That would be fantastic, right? But 2 new worshiping communities may decide that they have more in common and would like to work together. So there's going to be I envision a bit of matchmaking out there, right? We'll have an application process. We really geographically want to be very diverse. We don't want, God bless you, all of you in North Carolina to be the 25 cohorts, right? So it's probably going to take some recruitment too, right? So who in the world is in Nevada or Wyoming or Utah, right? So it's going to take a little bit of both, of application and recruitment, in order to get,
But a cohort will be a place that gets coached, uses the things you're creating, reports back on what should be tweaked or what was great. And okay.
Yeah, they're a community of practice,
Okay, gotcha.
right? And we would all love to hear their story of transformation over the period of year to 18 months and what they learned. Thank you. All right. Any other questions out there? I'm just kind of scanning the room. So a couple of things as we move forward is that I did create a really short little survey where we can keep track of if you want to be kept informed of everything that's going on, if you feel like you might have some writing skills or some presentation skills that you can contribute to the project. Maybe you just know right now that you want to keep up to date on these cohorts because you think your community will be part of it. So the little survey gives you an opportunity to give us your name, your email, and a number of choices of ways that you can see being engaged with this. And that will help us start to think about as many people as possible to engage. So Janet has given you the link to that survey in the chat. One of the first things that we're doing this fall that's sort of unofficially a Lilly piece is that we were already gathering leaders at Stony Point. Our Christian Formation Collective that I mentioned. Typically, we have 2 to 3 representatives from each organization come together in the fall. And then we always have some sort of other training event. And so that gave us the opportunity to have this Faith Formation at Home Symposium. We had just really a limited number of spots that we could afford to bring everybody in, but we're going to have 20 leaders gathering in person at Stony Point at the end of September, and they're going to start to really talk about this and talk about the resources, talk about the platform, talk about what parents really need and where leaders might be struggling. So it's a think tank of sorts. So that'll happen at Stony Point Center in New York at the end of September. We are going to have one part of that, 3 days that they're together. There's a 2-hour session that will be online and hybrid because we have a Presbyterian of Lake Erie, I think it is. Those leaders are coming together with us, and we're going to invite some others. So I just realized I'm not sure if I have a way to collect that information. So on this survey link, I believe there's like an other. So if you would like to be part of this hybrid Stony Point gathering, and I'll give you, then you can kind of comment there, and we'll be putting out some invitations. So that's going to be on September 28th. From 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And that would be over Zoom.
And in the survey, it is listed as online symposium in September. So if you
Oh, it
check
is
that
there.
box,
Yay.
you check
Okay.
that box. It doesn't have a specific date or time attached
Okay.
to it when we created it, but it is
Okay.
there if you check that box.
Okay. Yeah, so if you think that you might want to be present for that, there'll be a few mini presentations during that time, that 2-hour time frame. And then what we'll do is utilize the great skills of technology to have those in person gathering in conversation groups and those on Zoom gathering in conversation groups. So we wanted to be able to gather as many people as possible. Yes, Erin, did you have a question?
I do, thank you. I'm just curious if, like, I have some other folks who have come to mind who might be interested in this. Is there currently a place to direct them to find more information, or is this there will be by such and such a date, and you would maybe just keep us connected when we could do that?
And and are you referring to the Lilly grant in general or this online session?
I'm referring to people who might be interested in being cohorts.
Okay, so that the best place to send them is the survey link for sure.
Okay.
Anybody can fill this out.
Okay.
And also to make sure that you're following along in our quarterly newsletters.
Okay.
And our social medias. So
if
I
this is
think-
someone who hasn't heard anything yet at all,
right. Yeah, I would definitely for sure share with them the press release to give them
Okay.
a general idea of what it is, right?
Yep.
And then the survey link just really, I think I want to make sure, because sometimes a large mass sort of newsletter email can get lost in your junks and the firewalls and that sort of thing. So we're trying to figure out how to have a list of folks that we know that we need to communicate directly with that have specific interests. So
is there an easy and quick place to find the press release?
it's a great question. Beth?
Well, the link's in the chat.
The link's in the chat for sure.
Links in the chat.
It is not, the stories fall off the mission agency front page. Google is your friend. So if you Google Lilly Grant Presbyterian Mission Agency, it'll probably pop up. Is that the best way, Beth, or do you have another secret magic way?
No, so a few places. I usually go to just the main page and news and communications if it's fairly recent. Also, when you go to the Christian formation page, at the very bottom will be the most recent stories, and a story like this should be it populates automatically, so that would usually be pinned. But yes, I mean, just Googling at Lilly Grant and Christian formation will get you there. Yeah, but do you see we've done the link again in the chat? I would just say that.
Yeah. I think also too that as we develop how we're going to communicate, there's going to be a landing page for Lilly, that will be static and that we can add to. We're just not quite there yet. So look for us to be official in early 2024. But we knew that the community was interested in, so we wanted to hold this session just to sort of get your thoughts and ideas and how you're feeling about things. So one last question for you all, if there's anybody that would like to respond to this or put it in chat. So we've talked a lot about, cohorts being a good core for our church leaders to engage in, and then also talked about how we're developing resources for parents, families, and caregivers as well. So would love to hear your ideas. If there's anything that you can put in chat or even say out loud, maybe over the next 5 minutes, of things that you're hoping for, ways that you think parents, families, grandparents, significant adults could be supported. What are you dreaming of? This is your 5-minute think tank if there was something on your mind. Give you a minute or two to think about it. And you can feel free to put it in chat or also verbally answer. But it looks like if you have a verbal answer you'd like to share, Linda.
I'll say something. Oh, I've been retired 20 years, so I'm not going to volunteer to teach parenting. However, I will say this was the heart of my 20 years in children's ministry. And what I found is the most important thing, and this is still a problem because I've talked to other educators about it, is to figure out a way to convince parents and caregivers that they don't have to be experts in the faith. That part of what they model for their children is, I don't know. Let's talk about that. Let's ask the pastor. It's okay if can't quote scripture, and but to me, that the most important thing I did with parents was said, you be the leading learner. Tell them that it's never over, that you don't know, that these are because I really believe that God is in the questions, not in the answers. And so if you if you can think of ways to always insert that in the resources that we're not doing this to make you really experts at theology and Bible, and we're in this to make your kids comfortable talking to you and you comfortable talking to your kids. So that's my little
Thank you. I like that. I love that. Yeah. And when we say skill building, we really need to be specific that, yeah, this isn't a course to become experts. This is skills and questioning and being comfortable. Thank you, Linda. Yeah.
I would
Aaron.
also add that I think finding ways, and I think I'm seeing it in here, but encouraging finding ways to build faith practices into the everyday rhythm of life is just really hard. And so helping families and focusing on that, I think many of us probably have that, but being in a cohort helps us focus around that and to really be intentional about it. And I think that's and somebody else just said it in the chat. Yeah, Heather and I are on the same page. But yeah, making sure that that it is just kind of part of our daily existence, because I think that's what a lot of my families struggle with.
Great. Yeah, I do see that in the chat, as well as I see ways to help our young people share their stories, particularly of service. I think stories will be a huge part of this. Yeah, and grandparents. I find that I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for grandparents on all of this. As a grandparent myself, right? Yay!
Hey.
Hi, Jan. Go ahead.
Hi. I think one for me would be resources around hard subjects like grief and cancer diagnosis and other things. There are just not many resources for families to have those conversations. And this is new, or not new to me. It is right on my heart right now, because we've within the last couple of years had 2 children in our congregation diagnosed with cancer, and then now we've had a mom, a 38-year-old mom of 4 diagnosed with advanced cancer. And so there's just not that many resources out there. And I think I'm particularly interested in that for people in our congregations, but also that's when people turn to the church a lot of times. And so if the church was doing a good job of equipping people to have those conversations, and particularly at moments when they're very open to the church's assistance or things. So that would be whether it be in just children's books or in equipping families, but that would be something that I think would be a very big help to all of us.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. You never know when they're going to turn to you, and are you equipped to give the tools at hand? Yeah.
Something thinking about accessibility, and part of that is just being part of the everyday life of your family, but there's so many parenting resources out there that I constantly have to look at with an eye of, is this theologically appropriate for our families? And most of them aren't, but they look good and they look professional. And so I've always longed for, that sounds superficial, but it gives some weight to it, and it makes it more accessible when the design of it is approachable. And sometimes when I can find things that are theologically appropriate, the design isn't there, and it just doesn't feel like something to give out to families that they think, hey, this was made in this century, and I really want to use this. So accessible resources that look approachable for families.
I agree, Jenna. I'm learning a lot about, aesthetically pleasing toys in these days, right? There's like a whole new world of that sort of thing, and not to make light of it, but it matters to our young parents that things look like they were well planned and look good. Yeah. I thought I saw another hand up. Feel free to unmute. Parenting group resources. I keep hearing a lot about that, and something, of course, that's accessible and easy to use. So yeah, important to say that our goal will be to have a reach beyond church congregations too. So we don't only want to focus on, we want to equip and support parents that are currently in our faith communities, and we want to have tools and things that are accessible to those that may not be in our faith communities. That's a much harder thing to do, but that it will be one of our, it's good to have a stretch goal, right? So that is one of the stretch goals, is how are we reaching beyond who we already have. So looking to do that as well. Okay, well, I think we're coming to the end of our time. I really appreciate you all being here, being interested, weighing in. We appreciate your prayers as we're in this process, and your grace as we learn alongside everybody. And we'll work to communicate well. So please utilize our tools so that we can communicate with you.